Welcome back to World War Echoes, where we dive deep into a single week of World War II.
That's right.
This week, we're looking at September 4th through the 10th, 1939.
The very beginning.
It is, and it really sets the stage for, well, everything to come.
It does. We see political maneuvering, military clashes, and unfortunately, those first signs of the devastating human cost of this war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start our deep dive on Monday, September 4th. Winston Churchill rejoins the British War Cabinet as First Lord of the Admiralty.
A position he held, actually, during World War I.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And his appointment, it's a crucial moment. It signals Britain's commitment to confronting Nazi aggression.
It's a big departure from appeasement.
It is, yeah. And his leadership, as we know, proves to be pivotal in the Allied war effort.
Now, on the same day, we see that loyalty within the British Empire on full display as New Zealand declares war on Germany, even backdating their declaration to align with Britain.
Yeah, it underscores those strong ties within the Commonwealth. It also shows just how widespread the condemnation of Germany's invasion of Poland really was.
And the RAF, they don't waste any time. They conduct their first bombing raid against German warships at Wilhelmshaven and Brunsbüttel, unfortunately losing 7 bombers.
Yeah, it marks the beginning of the air war. It really shows the risks and complexities of aerial combat. And the loss of those 7 bombers, it's a sobering reminder of the human cost, even at this early stage.
Yeah. Sadly, we also see some of the darker aspects of the Nazi regime begin to surface on this day.
That's right.
We have the Katowice massacre, where German soldiers and Freikorps execute around 80 Polish civilians,
Including Boy Scouts?
including Boy Scouts, and then the Częstochowa massacre, which begins on this day. Around 1,140 Polish civilians are killed over 3 days.
It's a truly horrific event and foreshadows the systematic brutality that would characterize the Nazi occupation.
The targeting of civilians is it's chilling. But despite facing such a daunting enemy, the Polish people, they show incredible determination. They're committed to defending their homeland.
Absolutely.
We see this in the battles of Wizna and Roscoe, where Polish forces, outnumbered, outgunned, put up a fierce resistance.
They did. And these early battles, they highlight the courage and tenacity of those Polish soldiers fighting against a technologically superior adversary.
Absolutely. Moving on to Tuesday, September 5th, the city of Warsaw comes under intense German air raids, targeting not just military objectives, but civilian areas as well.
A key component of the German blitzkrieg strategy. They wanted to cripple Poland's infrastructure, disrupt command and control, and demoralize the population.
And this targeting of civilian areas, it's a clear violation of international law.
It is a tragic foreshadowing of the widespread suffering the war would inflict.
In the Battle of Tuchola Forest, the Germans achieve a decisive victory, allowing them to advance deeper into Poland.
This battle, it really exemplifies the effectiveness of that German blitzkrieg. Fast-moving tanks, coordinated air attacks, overwhelming firepower. It was just too much for the Polish defenders who were struggling with outdated equipment and tactics.
Right. And another crucial battle begins on this day at Piotrków-Trybunalski, which is a strategically important city on the road to Warsaw.
It highlights the Polish army's efforts to try and slow that German advance. The city's location made it a vital objective for both sides, and the battle raged for days with heavy casualties.
On the international stage, we see a mix of responses to the unfolding conflict. The United States declares neutrality, while South Africa chooses to join the Allied cause.
Well, the U.S. Declaration of Neutrality reflects that isolationist sentiment in America at the time. A lot of Americans were still haunted by the memories of World War I.
They didn't want to get involved in another European conflict.
Exactly, yeah. South Africa, though, demonstrates those complex political dynamics within the British Empire and, the truly global reach of this conflict.
And even the financial world feels the impact of war. The New York Stock Exchange reopens after Labor Day and sees a surge in stock prices.
That initial surge probably reflects a belief that the war would stimulate certain sectors of the American economy, particularly those involved in manufacturing and supplying war materials.
It's a strange thing to think about.
It is, yeah.
War, despite its destructive nature, creating economic opportunities.
It does.
Sadly, the war at sea begins to take its toll as well. The SS Athenia, a passenger liner carrying American citizens, is sunk by a German U-boat. This marks the start of the Battle of the Atlantic.
Underscores the indiscriminate nature of submarine warfare, and the vulnerability of civilian vessels. It also highlights that growing threat from German U-boats, which would play a crucial role, as we know.
On Wednesday, September 6th, the historic city of Krakow falls to German forces, a significant strategic loss for Poland.
The fall of Krakow, it's a major transportation hub, a cultural center. It was a blow to Polish morale and really disrupts those defensive lines.
Gives the Germans control of a key city in southern Poland.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, a tragic friendly fire incident occurs at Barking Creek. RAF Spitfires mistakenly attack RAF Hurricanes, highlighting those challenges of wartime coordination.
Yeah, the Barking Creek incident, while tragic, it, underscores that fog of war and the inherent difficulties of air combat.
Mistakes can happen, even among allies.
They can, and have devastating consequences.
Absolutely. On a more positive note, South Africa officially declares war on Germany, solidifying their commitment to the Allied cause.
Brings the resources and manpower of this key Commonwealth nation into the conflict, and their involvement would prove significant, particularly in the North African and Italian campaigns.
And Egypt, while maintaining its neutrality, takes steps to secure the Suez Canal, recognizing its vital role in the war.
That's right, the Suez Canal. It's a strategic lifeline, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, then to the Indian Ocean. Controlling it, crucial for those supply lines.
And troop movements.
Yes.
On Thursday, September 7th, we see more of that Polish spirit of resistance. The battles of Umeå and Wizna showcase the bravery of Polish soldiers, particularly that heroic stand at Wizna, often referred to as the Polish Thermopylae.
It's a testament to the courage and tenacity of the Polish army. Facing overwhelming odds, they held off a much larger German army for 3 days. Their stand, although ending in defeat, delayed the advance and really inspired resistance across Poland.
As the situation deteriorates, Polish headquarters are relocated eastward. The pressure on Warsaw was increasing.
It was, and that relocation, it really underscores how serious the situation was. With German forces advancing so rapidly, that decision to move east was necessary to avoid capture.
At the same time, the Polish garrison at Westerplatte continues to defy the odds, repelling those repeated German attacks.
They held out for 7 days.
Wow.
A remarkable story. They withstood a relentless German bombardment and inflicted heavy casualties. It became a beacon of hope.
And the French? They launched the Saar offensive, a limited incursion into German territory. But those limited objectives, well, they led to some public frustration in France.
They did. The French leadership was hesitant to commit significant forces while the situation in Poland was still so uncertain.
Led to some disappointment.
It did, yeah. People expected a more forceful response.
On Friday, September 8th, German ground forces reached the outskirts of Warsaw, marking the beginning of that prolonged siege.
And the capital city, a symbol of Polish national identity, faces this desperate struggle for survival.
The Battle of Gdynia, that strategically important port city on the Baltic Sea, also begins on this day.
Yeah, highlights the importance of sea control in this war. Those port facilities were vital.
But in a surprising turn of events, the Polish army launches a counteroffensive known as the Bzura counteroffensive. This temporarily halts the German advance and offers a glimmer of hope.
It was a bold maneuver. They managed to exploit a gap in the German lines, inflicted some casualties, and disrupt that enemy timetable.
Sadly, though, amidst these glimmers of hope, we see the continuation of German brutality. The Zapilo massacre, where approximately 300 Polish prisoners of war are executed.
A horrifying example of the war crimes committed by the German army. Executing prisoners of war, it's a clear violation of international law. So as we move into the weekend of this pivotal week, you see the events of September 9th and 10th really further illustrate the complexities of this early stage of the war.
Saturday, September 9th, that Polish counteroffensive at the Bzura River continues disrupting that German advance.
It does.
They even forced Germany to redirect troops, so it really had an impact.
It did. The Bzura counteroffensive, ultimately unsuccessful, but it demonstrates the resilience and tactical skill of the Polish army.
They exploited a gap in the lines, they inflicted casualties.
They did. Force the Germans to adjust their plans and really delay that advance on Warsaw.
But on the same day, German forces capture the key industrial city of Udu.
Right, and Udu, it's a major industrial center, so its capture gives the Germans control of valuable resources.
Infrastructure,
and it really marks the beginning of that German occupation of Poland.
which would become very brutal.
It would, yes.
Meanwhile, at Wizna, that small Polish force continues its heroic stand against overwhelming odds. I can't even imagine the courage.
I know. The defenders at Wizna, vastly outnumbered, outgunned, but they fought with incredible tenacity, incredible determination.
And their stand, it lasted for 3 days. against a much larger force. Became a real symbol.
It did, a symbol of Polish resistance and their unwavering spirit.
And on that same day, Hitler issues Directive Number 3, indicating his confidence in a swift victory in Poland and signaling a shift in focus toward preparing for war in the West.
Yeah, this directive shows Hitler's strategic thinking, his ultimate ambition for German domination in Europe.
He saw Poland as a stepping stone.
He did, a stepping stone to a wider conflict, and that directive sets in motion the planning for the invasion of France.
The Low Countries.
The Low Countries, yeah. And as that focus shifts westward, we see the British Expeditionary Force arriving in France, bolstering those defenses, and Canada formally joins the war.
Alongside Britain.
Alongside Britain, yeah. The arrival of the BEF underscores Britain's commitment to defending its allies.
On the continent.
On the continent. And Canada's declaration, it signifies that growing international dimension of the conflict.
And the solidarity of the Commonwealth nations.
Absolutely. So we enter Sunday, September 10th, and the situation in Warsaw is growing increasingly dire.
It is. That German bombardment intensifies, really pushing those defenders to their limits.
The siege of Warsaw becomes a symbol of Polish resistance. Those inhabitants, they endured relentless bombing and shelling, shortages of food, water, medical supplies, yet they, their will to resist remained.
Unbroken.
Unbroken.
And the Battle of the Bzura, which had offered that glimmer of hope, it reaches a turning point.
Right.
German reinforcements arrive, and the Polish counteroffensive is gradually pushed back.
Despite their initial successes, they just faced insurmountable odds. The arrival of those German reinforcements, superior firepower, air power, it turned the tide.
Dashed any hopes of relieving the pressure on Warsaw.
It did, yeah. And tragically, those heroic defenders at Wizna, they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The fall of Wizna, it's a military defeat, but it's a profound moment of courage, of sacrifice. Those Polish soldiers, led by Captain Władysław Radzeni's, they fought to the last man. Radzeni's, he chose to die rather than surrender, and he became a national hero.
Symbolizing that indomitable spirit of Polish resistance.
He does, yeah.
And on this same day, Canada's commitment is formally recognized with the publication of their declaration of war in a special edition of the Canada Gazette.
Yeah, and Canada's entry into the war marked a significant contribution.
To the Allied cause.
To the Allied cause. They would go on to play a vital role in the fight against Nazi Germany.
They distinguished themselves.
Yeah, made significant sacrifices in the name of freedom and democracy.
So, as this tumultuous week comes to a close, we see the fall of key Polish cities, the heroic last stands, the growing involvement of nations around the world, and that looming threat of a much wider European conflict.
Yeah, this week encapsulates the complexities of the early stages of the war. You see the strategic calculations, the acts of extraordinary courage, those devastating losses, and the far-reaching consequences.
As this first week of World War II comes to an end, the situation in Poland is, well, it's pretty grim. Despite incredible bravery, staunch resistance, the German blitzkrieg, it's proven to be a formidable force.
It has, yeah. That speed and ferocity of the German advance, it just overwhelmed those Polish defenses, led to the fall of key cities, the steady retreat of Polish forces. But their efforts, they weren't in vain.
You're right. The Polish resistance, they bought precious time for the Allies to prepare for that larger conflict.
Exactly. The Polish campaign, although tragic in its outcome, it served as a warning to the world about the dangers of Nazi aggression. It galvanized the Allied powers.
Set the stage for that global struggle.
It did.
And as we reflect on this week in 1939, we just can't ignore that immense human cost. The civilians caught in the crossfire, the atrocities committed, the families torn apart. It's just a stark reminder of the horrors of war.
Absolutely. The events of this week, the massacres at Katowice, CP the bombing of those civilian targets in Warsaw, it's all a testament to the brutal nature of war, the consequences of unchecked aggression.
So what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from this first week of World War II?
For me, it's that juxtaposition of the Polish people's unwavering determination to defend their homeland against the brutal reality of that German war machine. We see incredible courage, resilience, but also those devastating losses, the foreshadowing of the horrors to come.
It's a powerful reminder that even facing those odds, the human spirit, it endures.
It does.
And it underscores the importance of learning from the past, recognizing those warning signs, and working to prevent these tragedies from happening again.
I couldn't agree more. And while this week marks the beginning of a long and devastating conflict, it also marks the beginning of that global effort to To resist tyranny.
To fight for a better world.
Yeah.
A fight that ultimately led to victory, but not without incredible sacrifice. It's a legacy we must remember, we must honor.
Absolutely. As we conclude this deep dive, I'm left thinking about those what-ifs. For instance, how might the war have unfolded if the Polish counteroffensive at the Bzur River had been even more successful? Could they have stalled the German advance, altered the course of the war? It makes you think.
It does. It's fascinating to think about. And thank you for joining us on this journey through the first week of World War II. Join us next week as we explore another chapter, uncover more stories of courage, resilience, and that enduring fight for freedom.